Making guaranteed money sports betting sounds a little crazy, but today in this video I'm going to teach you how to make guaranteed money making a sports bet through a thing in the industry known as arbitrage betting. Now for all my content I'm going to be using OddsJam, and I'll have a link in the description where if you click on the link it's going to give you a week-long free trial, and then if you decide to keep using it, it's going to give you 35% off your first month. So to get started, while on the OddsJam main page, we're going to go right over to here to this arbitrage button. It's going to take us to our arbitrage page. Now you may be wondering, what is an arbitrage bet? An arbitrage bet is when you can bet both sides of an event and make money guaranteed. So on this side, we would be betting Darius Garland to go over 4.5 rebounds, and on rebet, we would be betting Darius Garland to go under 4.5 rebounds. And by betting both sides of the event, we can actually make guaranteed profit, which is going to be either $28 or $40. Now, in this example, we would bet $100 on DraftKings, and we would bet $200 on rebet. So either way, if he gets 5 rebounds, we're going to win on DraftKings here, and we'll lose on rebet. Or if he gets, let's say, 3 rebounds, we'll win on rebet, and then we'll lose on DraftKings. Now, OddsJam has a really nice feature where if you don't understand exactly, it's going to break it down in really simple terms for you. So either you're going to bet the $100 on DraftKings and you're going to win $240, and then you'll lose that $200 on rebet for a total profit of $40. Or what's going to happen is your bet on rebet is going to win, so you'll win $128, and then your DraftKings bet is going to lose $100, and you're going to make a guaranteed profit of $28.21. And anytime an arbitrage bet will happen is when the positive side is greater than the negative side. Now, if you don't know what these odds mean, we're going to have a link in the description so that you can learn about that. Now, the nice thing is that OddsJam is going to do all of this for you. So if we just refresh right here, it's going to pull up every single arbitrage bet that's currently available. Now, if we go back to, let's say, this bet, you can adjust your amount. So if you wanted to do 200, it's going to give you a guaranteed profit of at least $28. Let's say you only have $50 to put on one side. You're still going to get a guaranteed profit of $8, which may not sound like a ton, but you look at all these opportunities on here. You know, there is some serious money to be made on this. Let's see, like if we went and changed our bet parameters to just $50 and we refresh, look at this, guaranteed $6, guaranteed $5, guaranteed $5, guaranteed $2.50, guaranteed $4. And these bets don't take a long time to make. So, you know, you may make 10 of these bets in a day and you just made $40, which is an extra $1,200 a month. So when you're looking at the arbitrage bets, another thing that you may see that occasionally comes up, let's see if there's an example at all. Okay, so middle bet. Now anytime I see a middle bet, I love to take these. The reason why I like middle bets so much is because you have the potential not only to make a guaranteed $3 in this case, but you have the potential to win a ton, because with a middle bet you can win on both sides of the bet. So in this example, if the Brewers in the first inning are losing by less than 2 runs, then that bet wins. And the Reds, if they are winning by 1 run or more, then that side of the bet will win. So let's say the Reds in this case win the first inning by 1 run. Well, that bet's going to win, and that bet's going to win. So that's the amazing thing. And if you wanted to look up middle bets specifically, you can go right over here, and it's going to pull up all the middle bets. So see there, it's going to pull up, and it's actually going to show you on this screen what would happen. See right, you're going to make that guaranteed $3 or $16 depending on which side wins. However, if the Reds win the first inning by 1 run, both bets are going to win, and you're going to make $300. Now, these bets don't hit often, but the reason why I like to take them, if they show up, and they'll show up on the arbitrage page automatically if it is a middle bet that is an arbitrage bet. So the reason why I love to take those bets is because you're going to make guaranteed profit, and you're going to potentially have that lottery pick at making a giant win of $300 in that example. Okay, now that you know what an arbitrage bet is, we're going to get into some tips for beginners, and then we will get into the tips for experienced people. We're going to pull up an example. So I'm going to pull up this one right here. And the reason why I like to do that is you get to see what the odds are. You can see it's going to update in real time if it's still there. So see, the DraftKings one just disappeared. So that's why I like to pull it up, and then I can just refresh it. If we go to that, it's going to show us. So when you're making an arbitrage bet, what you want to do is you want to pull up both screens. So OddsJam has this new feature. It's going to take you right to the bet. Now, I don't like this as much. It's easier if you have a second monitor, right? You can move that to the other monitor, have both bets up at the same time. But I'm old school. Before they had this dual button, they had this one-click bet button, and that's what I prefer to use. Okay, so you can see what the odds are. So I'm going to click there. Right, see it is at minus 145. I'll load it up with 120. I'm not going to make that bet, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to here, shade and sharp, over 3.5 threes. So if I go to 4, and then see, this is why you pull up both. $70 right there. See, and then so I'm making a guaranteed $12. Now when you're making a bet, you want to see which is the biggest outlier on the opposite sides of the market. Now you can see that 145, not really near what the market is projecting, or 190. So in this case, you could place on either or. I'm going to say 145 is more distance from the rest of the market than 190 is from the rest of that side of the market. So I would place it C, and that's why you want to place it on the side that is furthest distance from what the rest of the market is predicting, because it's more likely to change. Now in this case, because the 154 is still smaller than the 190, still an arbitrage, and as you can see, OddsJam updated that in real time. So now instead I'm making only a guaranteed $7 if I were to go place the bet. Now I'm not going to, because I don't have any money on this side, so no arbitrage for me. So what I recommend is pulling up both bets, right? Get your amount preloaded in there, then you're going to make a judgment call. Okay, this one is a little bit closer to the market than this one is, or you might see, okay, that one just popped up, so that's probably not going to change. Still at 154, this one's still at plus 190, and then you're going to make your bets accordingly. So then you would just put this bet in, right? And this will be something that you get quicker with over time. My next tip is that when you are going to be placing an arbitrage bet, because they don't last for very long, especially for ones that are an event for the same day that you're making the bet on, you want to be already logged in, right? That way it takes you right to the bet. Takes you right to the bet, and then you can get your bet already in. So in this case, I would be like, okay, 134 is pretty far off, but this 115 probably in line as well. So I would make both of them in conjunction. You would go 200, right? 160. And then I would place a bet. In that case, I would have my bet made, and as you can see on here, I'm limited on Fanduel to only $111. But in that case, right, you're not wasting precious seconds trying to log in, and then by that time, one side of the bet might have changed odds, and it's no longer there. So you want to be already logged in, that way you can make your bet real quick. And when that becomes more of an issue, as you can see, it's 8:23. This game's at 10:30, so you have a 2-hour buffer. It's not going to change as quickly. But if you're within that hour range, those bets can change within the snap of a finger. So that's why you want to be logged in already to both sides of the bet before you're even placing it. So when you're making an arbitrage bet, I recommend, you just pull up your page. You're already logged into everything. Right, see, I'm wasting all this time trying to get over here, and I'm not logged in. These are seconds that my arbitrage bet could disappear. Right, see, I'm waiting forever for it to load. Right, I'm like, get on with it. Right, so I would do that before I would even look at any DraftKings bets, because now when I go to this, right, so I'm going to go to this one at minus 125. It is still there. I can make that bet rather than me wasting 10-20 seconds trying to log in, and in that time this one is gone. Now going into OddsJam, you can filter what you're looking for. If you don't have all these sports books, like let's say you don't have ESPN Bet, you can deselect it. Boom, it's not going to pull up any searches for ESPN Bet. And you can always change this, right? You can change the odds you're looking for, which doesn't really matter. Minimum, let's say you wanted to have a minimum of 3% pop up. You see, that's going to affect your results. See, and then it stops. And there's your minimum at 3.03, and go back up to the top, and we'll adjust that, get rid of it. If you want to adjust by your sport, the league within that sport, like if you wanted to not do CFL games, it's going to take that off. Date range, you can do bets that are just today, 24 hours, or even the next 7 days. And if you wanted to, you could even search up, like if you wanted to search up a TCU game, currently there's no ARBs involving TCU. So a lot of customization that you can get here on OddsJam. So the first tip that I recommend is removing the betting exchanges. And the reason why I recommend removing betting exchanges for new people is because if you have, let's say, no vig selected, right? We're going to go onto no vig right now. So if we go on to Darius Garland rebounds at 4.5, we're going to choose the over because that's what it shows on here at 244. You can see there's only $72 of liquidity. So if we did that, right, but by the time that you go to make this bet, the liquidity might be gone on Darius Garland, and then that ARB could potentially be gone. And sometimes the liquidity runs out real quickly, leaving you stranded, and then all of a sudden, when you were trying to make an ARB to get that guaranteed money, it's no longer there, and you're faced with potentially taking a loss. And for that reason, because the liquidity sometimes is not very much, and you have all these other sports bettors using software out there, they might see the same potential and nab that before you. So I just recommend removing that. Slows down the speed for you to get used to making arbitrage bets and get comfortable with it. Okay, so now that we have that deselected, we're going to go on to here, and it's going to show us all our remaining arbitrage bets. Now these are going to last a little bit longer just because they're either sports books, or in the case of these two right here, they're social sports books, right? So they're going to have a lot more liquidity since you're not betting peer-to-peer and you're instead betting against an actual sports book. So they're going to have more money to work with. So those arbitrage bets are going to be there a little bit longer. Now, when you are first getting into arbitrage betting, I'm going to refresh this, you're going to want to focus on American sports. And the reason why I say that is because, see, there is technically an arbitrage bet right here for this Brazilian soccer game. There's probably not too many Americans betting on Brazilian soccer. So you could go, and my typical size is going to be 200. You can make guaranteed $14.50. But when you're betting on an obscure sport like this, you're more likely to get your account limited very quickly. So that's why I recommend focusing on American sports when you're first getting started. Now, when you start to get limited, then you can expand to other sports. Now, when making arbitrage bets, you want to still appear as if you are a normal person. So you could stick like $1,000 on one side. You're going to make that money. But then you're going to get limited real quick. So what you want to do is look like a normal person. So I already have it set up here to where my highest bet size is $200. Now, if I only had $100, right? See, it's going to automatically preset to where the highest on one side is going to be $100. So for player props, I recommend doing a high of 200. And then let's say you have a main line pop up. So if I just go to my settings and I do market, I'm going to unclick player props, unclick alternate markets. We're going to show main lines. So let's just imagine that this is American basketball, because I would not normally bet on Japanese basketball. Again, I'm trying to appear as a normal person. But let's say this was like the Mavericks going up against the Cavs. Because it's a main line, then you could, in that case, go up to a larger number. I would still cap it at 500. But for a player prop, definitely cap it at $200 on one side, so you're appearing like a normal person. In addition to having a max bet size on both player props and mainline bets, another way that you can look like a normal sports bettor is to make sure that your bets are rounded into normal bet numbers that people would normally do. So as you can see, I have it already at 200. So OddsJam does a pretty nice job of rounding everything. Now on this, you can see it's at 267. 67 is kind of an odd number. So what I could do, if I wanted to, I could round that to 60, and it's going to put it at 180. So you just want to have it at round numbers that people would normally do. It becomes a bigger issue when, if I go to the calculator and let's say that one of the odds change. Let's say this changed to like minus 280. You can see that here it's going to tell me to put $180 on the Hard Rock side, and on the BetMGM side it's telling me to put $59.58. Now $59.58 would be a really weird bet. Normally a normal person's not going to go down to the cents part. So I would just round this bet to $60. It may screw up your profit over here a little bit. You're still going to make a profit, but it's not going to be exactly the same. But that's another way to look like a normal sports bettor. And again, you can pretty much do any of these. Even if you did like 27 and 200, 27 is going to look a lot better than like 2684. So OddsJam does a really good job of smoothing everything out for you. It's more so when the odds change and you want to kind of finesse it. Again, if we change it to like 285, it's going to say 180, 59.31. You probably want to change that to either 60 or 59. You don't want to do 59.31 because a normal person is not doing that. And another tip for beginners that are starting to arbitrage bet for the first time ever and using OddsJam is that you can go into the settings here and you can actually go into the bet warnings. So here's some things that you can turn off or keep on. You can show risky bets, you can show same game bets, you can show conflicting bets, and you can show previously placed bets. Now the one that I do take off is I take off showing risky bets. And the reason why is because if we scroll down to here, if you read this, there's different rules for the two different books, in this case Onyx Odds and Bet365. But the reason why I turn these off and I never do this is because the whole reason for arbitrage betting is that you would make risk-free money. There's no risk when you make these bets. But if you do a risky arbitrage bet, that basically takes away the whole point of having an arbitrage bet because you're adding risk into it. It could potentially win on one book and the other book avoids it. But I've also seen it where sometimes it voids it on the winning side and then the losing side sticks. So then you're just stuck with a loss. So that's why I take these off. So if I go to settings here and take that from showing, you can see my results decreased. And it's not going to have any more risky bets. Now I do keep same game bets and conflicting bets. And the reason why I keep same game bets and conflicting bets is because, for example, let's say I went and made this bet. I'm just going to act like I made it even though I didn't. And you're going to see this one is popping up. Now, imagine that this wasn't Onyx Odds. Let's say this was like Fanduel. You can click on it. It will show you what sites you have bets on. Here it's going to show that I have it on Onyx Odds and Ballybet. Now, I'm not going to make this one. Again, because you already have your bet made on Onyx Odds. But if this was a Fanduel, and let's say it was a Bet Rivers, the software for OddsJam is smart but simple at the same time. So if it was Bet Rivers and Fanduel, it's still going to say like, oh, you have a conflicting bet. But it would be okay to make because you weren't doing it on the same two sports books that you did on Ballybet and Onyx Odds. And that's another reason why I also keep it for the same game bets. Again, it doesn't really matter for same game bets if you are using the same sports books. Let's say that this was for Austin Hayes and this one was for Ellie De La Cruz. It wouldn't matter that it's the same book. See right here, Ellie De La Cruz. It wouldn't matter that it's in the same game because it's not the exact same bet on the exact same sports books that you made earlier. Another reason why I keep conflicting bets up on OddsJam is because you can click on it here and you can see what books you made the bet on and what the bet was. So another tip when you're making arbitrage bets, you don't want to, on the same site, choose both sides. So if we made this bet here with Austin Hayes under 1.5 hits on Onyx Odds, you wouldn't want to then take an arbitrage bet that might pop up in 20 minutes that has Austin Hayes going over 1.5 hits on Onyx Odds. While that would be an arbitrage bet, that's a dead giveaway to the site that you're using a software and exploiting their odds if you're taking the over on a bet for that person, and then later on you're also taking the under on that person. So you never want to do the exact same player and stat or team and stat on both sides of a bet on the same site. That's just going to be a giveaway, and you can get limited real quick. So with conflicting bets, it's nice you can click on it. I know that if I ever see this pop up for any bets later on today, like if I refresh it and it popped up, I wouldn't want to take, if Austin Hayes was over 1.5 hits and it was an arbitrage with DraftKings, I wouldn't want to take that bet because it would conflict with what I made earlier. So that's why I keep these up, because you can check, make sure that, like, again, if this was like Bet Rivers and this was Fanduel, it's saying conflicting bet, but it's really not, because you're using two different books than what you made earlier. So you can use it for information purpose for that. And you can also use it for information purposes in that I already made this one bet on Onyx odds. I don't want to make the opposite bet later on them. So that's why I keep those up. It's up to personal preference. If you wanted to, you could just go and hide it and it's not going to show up at all. But again, I like to keep it up just because it gives me information. And again, sometimes you're going to see bets that pop up that say it's conflicting just because the software is just saying you made this bet on this player and therefore it's conflicting, but really it's not, because it's not on the same two sites you used earlier. And same with the same game bets. It's just extra information for you to keep. Same with previously placed bets. It's saying I've already made this bet. Same with this, it's saying I've already made this bet. So it's just extra information. And again, these are all just personal preference. Again, my personal preference and what I recommend for first-time users is to take the risky bets off. If you're really concerned about getting arbitrage bets in time and stuff, you can turn this off. And maybe once you get a bit more advanced or you feel comfortable, you can turn this on. But I still don't really see a problem with having it on for beginners. Same with in-game bets and previously placed bets. So another thing that I recommend doing, and this is all personal preference, is let's say I made this bet. So let's just say I did it theoretically for $100. I'm going to add it right here. So it's going to go towards my OddsJam tracker. But then what you're going to notice is it shows up as a check mark. So what I like to do so that I have less clutter, so let's say I made like these first 5 arbs and then I wanted to scroll down. Well, rather than having to scroll down to go see my next ones, I'm just going to hide bet and it is no longer there. So I don't have to scroll it. So let's say I just went ahead and made like every single one of these in theory. So now I have all these bets that I've already made. Well, now I'm wasting time, and we know that arbitrage bets don't last for a long time, so I'm wasting additional precious seconds scrolling down when I could just hide bet, hide that, and see. So now all I have on my screen is going to be bets that I haven't made that I can make money off of. Now, if I want to go and see those hidden bets again, I can just always pull them right back up. And then you can go back to pre-match bets. And sometimes what you're going to notice is sometimes the software is a little slow. And let's say this thing will fade out, showing that it's not there. Well, then what's going to happen, let's say in theory it's not there. Sometimes that bet is still showing up, but I know it's not there. So that way I don't have to look at it. I'll just click hide bet. And it's no longer there. So that's a tip. Just like cleaning your room, you're going to clean the workspace right here so that you're only looking at bets that you need to make. Now, when you're making all these bets, it's either going to win on that sportsbook or it's going to win on that sportsbook. So you may have a lot of money that's being won on one sportsbook and not on another. As long as you don't need to withdraw, I highly recommend not withdrawing, because that's going to lead to you being more likely to be limited by a sportsbook. But if you do need to withdraw, that way you can make some bets on this sportsbook, then I recommend withdrawing. Otherwise, try to withdraw as little as possible so that your accounts don't get limited as quickly. Another thing that I recommend for people to avoid getting limited really quickly is to avoid really high percentage ARBs. Like a 5% ARB here, pretty high, you could take it though. Now it's only at 2.5%. Again, why I like to pull up the screen, because the odds updated. See, Fanduel changed from -128 to -144. So you're still making $8, which we'll go ahead and refresh that. So 4.5%, still perfectly fine, but I've seen some ARBs where it's showing a 30% ARB, and you can tell like one leg is like 200 points different than the rest of the market. So in those cases, I recommend avoiding those just because it's going to get you limited real quick. And if it is a social sportsbook like Rebet here or SportZeno, if it's one of those that's showing even a high ARB, like anything above, I would say like 3%, I would avoid those, just because if you make a bet on Fanduel and Bet365, these two are regulated by the state governments. I have not experienced any actual sportsbooks with a gaming license in the state voiding any bets, but I have in the past experienced social sportsbooks which are not regulated by the state. They will sometimes void the bets, and that's because they're not regulated by a state gaming commission. So let's say Bet365 is near the rest of the market here, and let's say Fanduel is actually SportZeno, and they were the side creating this nearly 5% ARB. Because they're so far off from the rest of the market, I would probably avoid it in that case, just because I don't want to have them voiding the bet on one side and then leaving the leg on the other side completely open and potentially making my bet a losing bet. Now, the final tip I have for any beginners is to just practice. Practice, practice, practice. Now, I have been doing this for a while, so it's very easy to me, comes second nature. Just gonna get that bet in. Right. And the more you do these things, you're going to know more exactly where to look. So I already know exactly where team shots on target is. Mirasol under 4.5. Right, I know exactly where to look. And I already know how much to put in, right? So 200. Put in 125 on the other side, which I'm limited. But see, I can do that, get my arbitrage bet in, and it probably took 10 seconds there. For these ones where it goes straight to the bet, real simple, because there's no work you have to do. You just put in the number that showed in the calculator. For something like this, you might go on to Bet365. It only takes you to the game page and you're like, I don't know where that bet is. You're scrolling around looking for it forever. But the more you make these bets, the more you're going to be comfortable with it, the quicker it's going to be for you. And you're going to be getting an arbitrage bet down in 10 seconds, which is what makes this real nice. Is, again, you can place that bet, that bet, that bet, that bet in. And see if I take this, 113. 135 player assist, Christian Braun, assist under, but see, I already know exactly where that's at. It's at 135. See, so it took me probably about 20 seconds to get that ARB in if I wanted to go like 160 and actually get the mounts in. 200, again, limited there, but it took me all of 20 seconds to get that bet in. I made $16, and then I can go to the next one, make another 14. So with that, you're making very quick bets to make guaranteed money. So in 10 minutes a day, I could make $100 if I wasn't limited on everything. And that's my ultimate goal, is to get it to where you get limited as well, because that means you've been making money. Ultimately, the more that you do this, the more you're going to be comfortable with it, be making these bets really quick, and you're going to become an experienced pro. And so that's going to bring me to my next set of tips. It's going to be for the experienced people. So once you become more experienced, right, then you can start adding your bet exchanges that have limited money to bet on. And because of that, they're not going to last as long, right? And those are those bets. Sometimes they only last a second. Sometimes they last a full minute, depending on how much liquidity is on it. I've seen sometimes where it's only $100 here on this bet that's available to get in for no vig, and sometimes it's 10,000. But once you become experienced, you can get that bet in 20 seconds. That's when you can add in the sports betting exchanges, give you a bit more options to bet. Now, there's not too many right now, but still, additional options, especially here at the top. Easy $8 you can get in. And see, now one of them changed. No vig changed, so the liquidity is no longer there, and that is exactly why I recommend that for only the experienced arbitrage bettors. And for that reason, when you become experienced, along with you're going to choose the side that is the positive EV side for a bet, You also want to choose any of the exchanges or social sports books first, just because you don't know how much liquidity they actually have. Now, the social sports books will have unlimited liquidity, but sometimes they'll show the odds and they're not actually there. So I still like to place the social sports book side first. Regardless, I'll just have this bet and the Fanduel bet pulled up at exactly the same time. And then I will make the Sportsino bet, and then I will make the Fanduel bet. And then, so for this example, no longer there. You could still make 79 cents, but if I was to pull this up, I would pull up the no vig side first and place that in before I place the Hard Rock bet always. Even though the Hard Rock one is more distance from the rest of the market, right? That's clearly the one that is the outlier versus that is not an outlier. But you just don't know how much liquidity there is on that side until you actually go on it. So I'll do that right now. So we are going to go over to the NBA. And we will go to the Lakers once it finally loads up. Lakers, rebounds, Kelly Olynyk. There he is. We're going to go to under 5.5. Now it's still showing up as 135, but there's only $10. So if I wanted to, I could do $10. However, that's not enough to make you any sort of money. So if I went to the 159 at 150, but then the risky run is, let's say you wanted to make that bet and someone made a $25 bet. Well, that 150 is no longer there, and then you're wasting time trying to do 125, right? So I'll have both of these bets pulled up, but I know they're probably not going to change. And so you're going to notice that if I do 150, place that bet, and then immediately place the Hard Rock bet that I have pulled up, I can then get it in on both sides. So that's what I recommend for experienced people is you can add in the bet exchanges, and the social sports books are already still there from when you were a beginner, but I always recommend getting those in at the same time. So a tip for advanced people is that in order to make the best use of your money, what I like to do is I like to switch it to the day of. And then if you do it right before game times, see if I make this bet right here at 200, the bet is going to settle today. So I'm going to have this winnings by tomorrow versus if I chose a week-long time frame. So on this bet, you're going to be waiting 2 additional days, locking up $330 to make $14.50. You could be making this bet today on an NBA bet right here, right? You could be locking up that $300, making $28 guaranteed. Do it again tomorrow, make another $28. Do it again the day after, let's say make $20. So then you made $60 compared, and see the bet just went and disappeared, so it's no longer there. But so you could have made $60 in the time frame that you're waiting 3 days for a bet to settle. So that's a tip right there. You're going to change it to today. You're going to focus on games that start today, right? Take that. We're making guaranteed $30, and then we'll have that money to be able to use again tomorrow. In addition to changing your bet range to just today, that way you have the best use of your capital. Another thing I like to do for experienced people is I recommend a minimum percentage. You don't want to lock up your money on something that's giving 0.5% when you could be locking up for 3%. So if I got that in, right, and it's keeping me kept. And the reason why I recommend having a minimum percentage, and you can do it for whatever you want, like if you want to go down to 2% and have that, that's fine. But the reason why I recommend that for the 2-day settings, if you are limiting it to just a today date range, is because the closer you are, let's say this was a 9 p.m. game instead of 10:30. The odds are a lot of these are going to disappear within 30 seconds to a minute, but you're comfortable getting it in under 20 seconds. But these are going to be constantly going away rather than it still being there. And that gives you the opportunity to be like, okay, there's not a single bet that is 2%. Or I like to cap it at 3%. There's not a single bet that is at 3%. Well, then it's not worth using your money on because that's $360 it's locking up, right? $360, $360, $370. That's $370 that, let's say you go and use it on, we go and get rid of this, we absolutely clear it, and it's still a today bet. But let's say you got rid of that 3% and you made a bet on this. Well, you're only getting $4 for a $370 worth of capital. And you may be like, that's not worth it, especially because those bets that were above 3% might have disappeared. But oh man, I waited 5 minutes. This one popped up. And now you're only using $340 rather than that one down here. You're using $315 for 6, or you use $340 for $11, right? It's just a better use of your capital. So if you're going to focus on a to-date date range, I highly recommend you have a minimum. I like to keep it at 3%. That makes it worth my money. So here's another example of things to avoid. Here's a 10%er. Well, it's not there anymore. But if you had gotten it in at positive 130, you can see that that is crazy off the rest of the market. And if you choose a bet that is that far off from the rest of the market, they're going to know that you're using some sort of software against them, and they're going to limit you real quickly. So anything that is that crazy high, unless you are using someone else's account and you do not care if it gets limited, you just want the most bang for your buck, there's $23, then feel free to take it. But you might say like, okay, I do not like those high ones. I'm going to cap a maximum at 5%. That's going to be less likely to get me limited, right? And then you're not going to see anything above that. Another tip for people that are a little bit more advanced in making arbitrage bets is that you want to try to make arbitrage bets when the lines are most off. And there's going to be 3 times when that is. The first one is going to be when the lines first drop for a game. The second time is going to be when lineups are first announced, or when an injury is announced and that affects the lineups, or about an hour before game time. Now, me personally, my favorite time to make arbitrage bets is going to be an hour before game time. It's just a bit more convenient. It's generally after work. During this time is going to be when you have the most action being put down by a lot of different sports bettors, so the lines are going to be changing and flip-flopping a lot. So my favorite time is an hour before. For some of the sports, you'll notice that the lineups consistently come out around the same time. Like for baseball, it usually comes out about like 3 hours before the game starts. Basketball is usually about an hour before, maybe 30 minutes before, depending on the team. It's the same with the NFL. The official lineup usually gets announced about an hour before or so, like those that were doubtful or questionable. You'll find the official status, so then you'll start seeing lines change. For when game lines first drop, it's going to be really dependent on if you're up at those times. Like for the NFL, you'll start seeing the game lines for the next Sunday drop after that Sunday's games are complete, so around midnight, 1 in the morning. Same with basketball and MLB, since those are usually about every single day. You'll usually see the lines start to drop around midnight or 1 a.m. the day before for the next day's games. So those ones, you can find some lines for that are really off, but again, not everyone is up at 1 a.m. or 12 a.m., at least on the East Coast. On the West Coast, it's a bit more manageable. So if these times, such as an hour before the game starts, or when lineups first drop, or even when the game lines first drop, don't work for you, it's not the end of the world. There's going to be arbitrage bets all the time, but these times are generally when the most and best arbs are available, just because there's the most action being put down or the lines are most off. So if I refresh this, you'll see it's 6:41 p.m. There's not a lot of games today, but this one, you gotta be quick. It's about to start. But you'll see 8:10 p.m., 6:45, 6:45, 8:05, 7:30. So I'm roughly about an hour beforehand, and there's not really a ton of games today, and you're still getting decent arbs down. So that's generally why I like choosing an hour or so before the games start. Again, it's the most convenient for me. You can hit them right when you get off of work, at least if you're on the East Coast like I am. If you're on the West Coast, it might be a little harder. You might work better for those 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. games. But you'll find out whichever one's best for you. But try to do it during those peak times so that your money is being most efficiently utilized. Another tip is that once you become really experienced doing all of this, is that you are going to know which books move real quick, which books move real slow. So I can tell you Bet365, usually real slow to move odds. DraftKings, sometimes slow, sometimes fast. Fanduel is always really fast to move their odds. So once you know which ones move quickly and which ones don't, like Bet365, usually really slow to change their odds. Sometimes if I know something's real quick to change it, like DraftKings or FanDuel, I will just place that bet. So in this case, it would be 170. So I would place 170. Sometimes I will pull up and do that DraftKings side before I even do the Bet365 side. So it's going to be Jokic under 3.5 turnovers. There we go. Right, but because I know they're slow, and if it was a high ARB, something like 5% like this, I know that that one side will sometimes change really quickly. So in order to negate that, I will change that. See, if I had waited for them to both come up, it would no longer be there. However, that 120 is still there. See, and now that bet's not even there on the DraftKings side. So that's why on some of these that are real quick to change, I will pull it up, make the bet before I even pull it up on the other side. And that's something that you're going to feel out with experience. Now, as you become more experienced and you're making all this money, books are going to start to limit you, and that's going to change your options. So in this case, just like I mentioned before, how you want to bet the outlier first, but also you want to bet your social sports books or your peer-to-peer betting exchanges first. When you become limited, you want to place that limited side first. So it's real nice. Fanduel is the only one that does this. The others typically do not. Right, if I go and do that, it's going to tell me that I'm limited to only $90 versus the other books will typically not tell you how much you are limited to, and then you're kind of guessing. Some of them, like I know on Caesars, I know that I am limited to typically between 50 and $100. Now this is a main line, so I know I'll be able to get $100 down on Caesars. On Fanatics, I know, will limit me to $10. But some of these, Bet365, sometimes I can get down 30, sometimes it's $1. You really don't know until you start to try to place a bet. So I recommend placing it on the limited side first, because the worst thing you could do is place $80 on this side on NoVig, and then you go to stick $150 on Bet365, and then all of a sudden you are down. Well, let's put it in this case. So let's say you only got $30 down on that side. It's going to tell you you're either going to win $130 or you're going to lose $61.82. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose of an arbitrage bet. An arbitrage bet is supposed to be you are guaranteeing yourself $10 no matter what. And then that's the primary appeal of an arbitrage bet. That's why I love arbitrage bets. It's because it gives you guaranteed money. There's no risk involved at all. So just to give some clarification, because I know throughout this video I've given several different tips on which side to bet first, whether it be the positive EV or outlier side first, and then I said you should bet the betting exchange side first, and then my latest tip I said that you should bet the limited side first. There's kind of a hierarchy to all that, so I'll clarify it right now. So when you make your arbitrage bet, you want to check to see if it has a limited side. If it has a limited side, such as in this case, I'm limited on value bet, you always want to bet the limited side first. Then let's say you go on to your arbitrage bet and there's no limited side, but there is a betting exchange involved, such as in this case, sport trade. Then you want to bet the betting exchange side first. Then let's say you go to make your arbitrage bet, and I'll scroll down to see if I can find an example. Here we go. If your arbitrage bet that you're going to make doesn't have a side that you're limited on, and it doesn't have a betting exchange side involved, then that's when you make the positive EV or outlier bet first. So in this case, both of them are pretty decent outliers. I would say that this Fanduel one is probably the bigger outlier, but you could go either or in this case because they're both pretty decent distance from the rest of the market. So that kind of sums it up. Check to see if your arbitrage bet has a limited side in it. If it does, you bet that side first. If it doesn't, then you check to see if it has a betting exchange involved in it. And if it does, you bet the betting exchange side first. And if it doesn't have either of those, that's when you make the positive EV side bet first. Now, there's plenty of other videos out there that you can find about arbitrage bets, but they only focus on the positive, and there's a lot of positive. But occasionally, sometimes when you make an arbitrage bet, one of the sides is going to adjust, and all of a sudden you are faced with taking a loss. Now in this case, let's say we made this bet on Fanduel at plus 112 because it was the side that was most off. But then for some reason, Caesars changed their side to minus 120 to match the rest of the market. All of a sudden, this is no longer going to be a winning bet. Now the first thing you can do is, let's say that was the bet here on Fanduel. Sometimes you can cash out right away, take an immediate small loss, in this case $20, 18.28, so you're taking like $1.72 loss. Sometimes it's better than, if you take $5 loss, or in this case, let's say it was $180 they had on one side. $1.80 is a lot less of a loss than $180 if you are really worried about risk. The second thing that you can do is, in this case, because it is a positive EV bet compared to the rest of the market, is you can just roll with it as a positive EV bet. Now, it all depends on your risk tolerance for that. If you have a higher risk tolerance and you normally make positive EV bets over here anyways, then it's probably not that big of a deal for you. You'll just roll with it. Now, in some cases, you'll see on here it will have no VIG listed. If I go and click there, no VIG, sometimes it'll have no VIG up here. And if that's an option, what you can do is you can try creating your own bet on no VIG. So in this case, right, if no VIG was an option, I could try doing minus 110 on no VIG, and that would create a plus 110 bet for someone to take over here on this side of the market. And there might be someone willing to take it. In that case, you just created your own ARB and still made that $1.60. And if all that fails and you still want to get out of the bet, but there's no cash out option, there's no VIG option like in this case, then what you could do is, let's say you had to do it here on BetMGM at minus 120. What you can do is you can just go and take a small loss. And what you could do is you could just go to the arbitrage calculator, or you could even do it on here. Let's say, the odds are at minus 120 and you put $180 on this side, right? You can make the bet an MGM and you want to round it. So I would say $208 rather than $208.15, or you could even do $210. And you're taking roughly at least a $6.60 loss plus $1.60, so $8.20. You'd be taking an $8.20 loss, which, may sound like a lot, but again, it only takes less than 30 seconds to make an ARB bet. So if we made this bet right here, we already made up for a loss. So if you're focusing on doing an ARB only strategy to make that guaranteed money, just find a way to settle the bet on the other side. Take a small loss rather than risking that $180 potentially. And you lost $8, no big deal. You just made $8 when you combine these two bets. Not the end of the world. And then that's just going to happen when you are doing bets. Now again, this one will last for a bit because it's 2 hours and some change before the actual game starts, but let's say it was within 10 minutes. The bets are more likely to change before you can get both sides in, the closer it is to game time, just because there's being more action changing the odds closer to game time. Now with a betting exchange option like no VIG, or if you look at your other ones, you could go on a Sport Trade or ProfitX, one of these sports betting exchanges, and I can click on the game. And let's say all these drop down to, rather than being minus 135, 119, they all drop down to 160. And what you can do is you could go on to rebounds, go to Kelly Olynyk, in this case over 4.5, minus 160. And if you wanted to, you could actually go and create and try to make your own ARB. So in this example, right, if we had minus 136, we know that we would need it to be under minus 136. So if we went on to, like, let's say minus 135 to try to make it a slight ARB, and that's what we're trying to get it at, is over at minus 135. And in this case, I will do just $1 as an example. You can do that and then potentially get filled. Now, in this case, it may get filled because it would make it on the opposite side at plus 135, and the only one that is better than that is Fanduel. So somebody might take it out there, and that would then give you an ARB, or depending on the situation, you could make it so that it's a lot smaller of a loss than if you had to do it at minus 150. If you were able to undercut the market, let's say, and do like minus 138 and get filled. So that's your final solution. I don't see that talked about anywhere in the sports space at all, is you can pretty much have damage control if no VIG offers that market, and you can create your own bet as long as someone takes it on the other side. And with that example, that wraps up pretty much all the tips that I have used in my arbitrage career, if you want to call it that, that has made me thousands of dollars. So if you are interested in trying arbitrage betting out for yourself, I'll have a link in the description that if you use will give you a week-long free trial. And on top of that, if you decide to keep using it after that week-long free trial, it's also going to give you 50% off your first month. And what you'll see is that price for the first month is going to be $250, and this price for some people initially turns them off. What I always tell people is take advantage of the week-long free trial. You should easily be able to make that $250 in the first week. So use that week-long free trial to make the money that's going to pay for your month's subscription. And if for some reason you're unable to make that $250 in your first week during that week-long free trial and you decide it's not worth it for you, that's okay. You don't have to sign up for that month-long subscription afterwards. So don't be turned away by this price that shows up. Take advantage of the week-long free trial. There's no harm in it. And from that week-long free trial, evaluate if it's worth your money or not. And in addition to taking advantage of the sportsbooks through arbitrage betting, I'll also have a bunch of other videos on my YouTube channel showing you how you can make additional money from the sportsbooks. So if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And with that, y'all have a good one taking that money from the sportsbooks, making easy thousands of dollars on your end as well.